Hello everyone, welcome once again to What Does That Piece Do? My name is Joe, and today I'm doing another segment of Art of the Game. For those of you that don't know, this is basically a video series where I take someone's very hard work, the blood, sweat, tears that they poured in over many months or years into this amazing game and put it out in the world so that the rest of us can play it and see it, and then I'm just going to tear it all down within 5 minutes or less. Well, that's not what I mean to do anyway. I mean, I'm doing a little bit of a critique, but I critique because I care. You know, I really want to celebrate some of this amazing artwork that goes into these awesome history games that we play and love. These are all games from my collection, so I really do appreciate all the work that's gone into them. I really want to, just glow up those artists as much as I can. And along the way, there's a couple critiques that I'd like to make, just, based on my perception of the games, how they play, and what some of the design flaws are maybe here and there, just for folks to sort of look out for in the future if they're ever designing a game themselves. So just some minor critiques along the way, but mostly, yeah, this is a celebration of great art in these games. So if you're into this kind of thing, please do like and subscribe, because I'm going to be doing more and more of these videos. I've done a few already, and I'm going to continue to do my tutorials, my dives into history and some of the games, as well as reviews, what I started doing recently too. So check them on out if you haven't had a chance to look at them yet. So decided to change things up a little bit here. As far as the rating system goes, I've caved in and decided to do that whole, A, B, C, D, S tier of the games that I critique here, that a lot of other content creators are doing lately. I thought it kind of made sense here. So I've got those tiers all set up then for this game, and I've kind of gone back and looked at some of the ones I did in the past and see if I could apply that same tier methodology as well. So we've got A, which is, are we going to play this game again soon? Means I really love it and I can't wait to get these cards in my hand and look at the beautiful art on them. B, meaning beautiful but flawed slightly. C means, can we fix them? Actual improvements that I'd like to see if there's another version of this game to come out. D, meaning, do I have to look at the cards to play the game? Because I really don't think the art is that great. I'm not going to have one of those today. Unfortunately, one of the ones I reviewed in the past, I kind of put in that tier. But the S tier, though, is shuffle and deal, just so I can look at those cards, because they are just so beautiful. I want to hang them on the wall. The art is so amazing, right? So try to apply that methodology to the half dozen games that I am reviewing today. And also, I would say these games kind of fall into two categories as far as playing style. I've got some games that are kind of, they're multiplayer games. They're meant to be played kind of quick and on the fly, so it really helps to have very good, clear art, so you know what to do with these, so you can make some quick decisions, so the other players aren't sitting around waiting forever for you to make your move. And then there's a few games that are solo, so the cards kind of serve a different purpose in those games. So the art style and the design can kind of, play into either of those. And so I'll be looking at some of that from that perspective, like how are the cards actually used, and how does the design and style of the games really, affect them, and how good I think the art and the design truly is when it comes to these games. All right, so let's take a look at these. Let's get right into it. Okay, so first game I want to look at today is Granada, The Last Stand of the Moors from Compass Games. Essentially, we've got four types of cards here, basically. You've got your Moor deck, this is for the Moorish player on one side, and on the other side, you've got your Christian deck here. They both kind of serve the same function in gameplay. There's also these sea travel cards to determine, what the conditions of the waters are, if anyone dares sail across the Mediterranean. And then we each have these cards, just two of them. They're surrender cards, basically. If you decide to give up your castle, you can turn in these two cards. You only got two opportunities to do that. So let's look at the art really quickly. First of all, it's a very distinct and cool style that we have here. It's kind of this sort of medieval, slightly leaning into early Renaissance. I mean, this is the early Renaissance period. We're not dealing with the most artistic period necessarily. There's a lot of art going on, but then there's a lot of war still happening too. So you could say that this kind of leans into very early Renaissance, very late medieval because of the nature of this conflict that's going on. But the cards themselves are very beautiful, very evocative. They're fairly clear to read and see. There's a couple indicators on them. There are the different shields for which type of armies you're activating and moving around. You've got some numbers on here where applicable. Some may be to seed movement, some may just be to be for other things as far as like trying to gain your initiative when you're playing. Yeah, the art is very evocative of that style though. It's very beautiful work, both types of cards. I think they look amazing. They're very vibrant and still distinct, like I started to kind of wonder that they might be a little too busy overall. I'll get into that in a second, but I still think they are really easy to play with and look at and decide what's going on. I mean, there's quite a bit going on. It might take a second to focus your eyes on what you're doing here, but they're really neat. They're really cool looking. Now, as far as the backs of the cards go, for these ones that are going into your hands, they're, first off, it's kind of hard to decipher which one's which. You just got to remember, well, this one has Arabic writing on it, so there's your Moors there. The other black eagle here are the Christians. I'm not familiar with that type of iconography for this period of Catholic Spain specifically, so it kind of throws me for a loop sometime. The backs of the cards almost have the same weight as the fronts of the cards. I tend to think of, the backs of cards should be a very either simpler or a bit more different of a style than the fronts so that you can really discern right away. When you've got these just laying on the table, it's kind of hard to remember which side's up and which side's down as you go to shuffle them. And maybe when first setting them up, you can get a little bit confused between the two types of decks, but it's not the end of the world. I mean, a lot of great work has gone into the detail on these cards. Can't really complain about that too much, but I'd like to see something a little bit more distinct between the fronts and the backs. Like I say, they're pretty busy. The art is so great, though. It's hard to fault them, but there's just a lot that went into them. I really think that, yeah, maybe the backs could have been a bit simpler of design or something. I start to think of, when I think of this game, and I do like to play this game because I like to hold these cards and just look at them and look at the beautiful art on them as I'm playing. It kind of reminds me of the first time I went to a proper European museum that had actual Renaissance art in Europe. I went to the Prado in Madrid many years ago, about 10 years ago. It was great to see some of these classic works of art. And at the end of the day, though, my eyes were full. It kind of overwhelmed the senses. And it's almost kind of like what's happening here. Like your eyes get full really quickly. I think there could be a couple more muted, like, take a step back on a couple of things here just to sort of calm it down a little bit, but I just really like the characters. I really like the design overall. So that was my only minor critique of this game, because otherwise it's on tier A. Are we going to play this again? Because I do want to play this game again soon because, well, the cards are so cool and it's just overall a fun game. Next up, for another two-player card-driven game here, we've got Shores of Tripoli, which essentially just has two decks again. One deck for the Tripoli player and the other deck for the American player. So same sort of style of play, just get the cards into your hand and you got to decipher what they're being used for and play them on out. Again, we are seeing some beautiful art on these cards, a lot of sourced art from history, beautiful drawings of ships, some other classical art painting of the time of the historical period, some portraits of American figures and figures from the Middle East or the north coast of Africa. Great art overall, really neat banner that goes across the middle too. So I should say most of these cards do go into your hand, but there's a couple face up to look at that can only be played at a certain moment, but each player knows that those are available to the other player, and they're setting up the conditions for the player to play that, so they kind of got to be on the lookout for that. But like I say, great visuals, nice banner, neat little texture to it, pretty clear to read text. That is to say, though, there is a lot of text on here, though. So when it's supposed to be, it's a relatively fast-playing game, and once you get used to these cards, I don't think it's too much of an issue, but there might be the odd card that could use a little bit of just iconography. Like there's ones that show up fairly regularly that are, you get used to them. There's just a little bit of text, but it says Pirate Raid. Hey, wouldn't it be neat if there's like a Pirate Raid symbol or something? There are some symbols that are being used for just some basic function, kind of upkeep of the game. Like if an event, if this card plays an event, then it is removed from the game. So just so that you know, hey, careful if you trigger this one, you're not going to see it really ever again. And if plays a battle card, this card is removed from the game. Same idea. So some little icons there that are in different colors as well, just to point those things out. But again, a very neat design though, very cool look, feels like a classic document that you are holding in your hand with all the textures and motifs on there. It is a beautiful game overall. I looked at the map in one of the previous videos and just really glowed up that map very nicely too, because it's beautiful. But the one thing of interest to point out here is the fact that when you look at these cards next to the map, it's kind of hard to tell that they're from the same game. There's not a lot of motifs shared between the two. There's two kind of distinct styles. I think there's two different artists that work on them, and it kind of shows though. So when you're looking at, the backs of the cards, it doesn't quite go with the board necessarily. The fronts are slightly different style too. But no, here's what I was talking about with the other game too. Like the backs, very stark. You can see right away. This is the back of the cards. Very dark, very simple, very plain. Then the fronts are the ones that look so different and have all the text and whatnot. So there's an example of that, of what I mean. But otherwise, it's a pretty straightforward game. There's not a lot of complexity to it. So to take the time to read the cards, it's not too tough. I do like the fact that some of these banners sit a bit higher on a few cards these are cards of consequence, essentially. I mean, they have a lot more text on them, but these are ones that can pretty much win the game for a player when they play them. The right conditions on the board for them to actually just say, all right, doing this, and this could win me the game here. But overall, a really beautiful design, really nice, simple, clean, with just the right sort of like historical flavor on there. So these are yet again a tier A game cards for me. And for the next game we're going to look at here, this is Land and Freedom by Blue Panther Games, about the Spanish Revolution and Civil War. It's basically comprised of 3 decks for the 3 different players, and there's also a deck for the non-player, which is the enemy that you're all working against here, the fascist cards. Even if you're playing this with some solo bots, you're still going to use the same decks. It's a really straightforward solo system. So being able to parse the details on the cards is very important in this game as well, with all the iconography, the values, and with some of the events that are on the card. They're all pretty plainly written out there. I will say I kind of took this game to task. It is a great game. It's an amazing game, despite the art being a little lackluster. When I talked about the maps, I really called it the fact that some of the icons on the map and also on the cards, they're not actually icons, they're just kind of small pictures, so they're kind of hard to parse and read here. On top of that, there isn't a heck of a lot of artistry. There's a lot of text kind of crammed in here. It sort of seems wall to wall. There's some great flavor text along the bottom, but there's a lot of flavor there because, wow, this is one heck of a conflict with a lot of moving pieces in here. So great to have all that, but it almost starts to over-clutter the card a little bit. I do think that the layout could be done a little bit better just to accommodate that. Like I said, there's not a lot of artistry going on here. I think these do need another pass, but the way that they are laid out is very smart. I mean, you got the value in the top left corner. Then you go on down, you can see all the different ways that this card can be used when it's in a tableau, which is very important. You display these cards in a tableau and you can just kind of stack them in such a way where those icons line up to each other. Again, images, not icons necessarily, but it's pretty handy in the way that it's done. And then you've got the event text in the middle, which is handy. It's going to be a one-time thing, so you only really need to look at it that one time when you're reading it out and acting it out. But otherwise, it sits great in your hand and everything. So functionally, I think it does some things very right. Just layout-wise, some of the colors are, it kind of has like this faded newspaper kind of look, which is kind of neat in a certain way, but I just think it needs a little bit of a do-over with the font and the way the icons are designed on here. And also, I'll say the backs of these cards for the 3 different decks, They're kind of flat and they kind of look very similar except for the actual symbols on them themselves. They all use the same shade of red, which is weird because there are colors on the fronts of the cards for like the borders and whatnot that show the distinct decks. So I don't know why you wouldn't want to inject some of those colors onto the back as well, just to make them a little bit more distinct. And then, same with the fascist deck, the evil bad guys, kind of a flat design on the back. The front, though, it tells you what you need to know as far as the iconography in the way that you read it anyway. So I got to give a shout out to Alex Zatarain, who took a stab at redesigning these cards themselves, just as a pet project, I guess, and they posted them on BGG, and I think they look great. Like, you see some very distinct color differences. The iconography's been reworked a little bit. The layout and the font, I think, looks beautiful and brilliant. What he did with the photos looks really great too. It kind of sits nicely in the card, as opposed to the kind of collage-y looking layout that we have on the cards in the current state today. This is the one game that, if there's ever a release in the future, I'd like to see the art reworked for a different release. So I have to give this one, for the art itself, I got to give it a C for can we fix it? Because I think they can be fixed, as Alex has proven, and I hope that happens in the future and we see a different version of this game with the art that it truly deserves. And up next, we are going to look at a classic game from GMT, Time of Crisis. Uses a deck of starter cards that every player has, and then some cards that they can purchase. And then there's some event cards, which is basically all the types of flavors of cards. By the way, I'm looking at the Iron and Rust expansion as well. I've got that because, well, the cards are pretty uniform all throughout, for better or worse. So let's talk about these starter cards you have in your hand to begin with. They're very basic, very straightforward. They just got a number and a color, a bit of a symbol on there, and then a graphic in the middle. And then they've got that, kind of classic GMT sort of background. Looks a little marbled. And then as you purchase these other cards, well, they've got, just different numbers, those same symbols, and then an image, and then got that classic Times New Roman text a la GMT, which is kind of, center aligned on the cards themselves. Some of them are pretty wordy again. So for a relatively fast playing game where you got to deduce what's in your hand, there's quite a bit of text on there because some of the cards are fairly complicated. The game, once again, once you get playing and you've played it a bunch of times, you probably know what to look for just by the name of the card itself. So there's not a lot of interesting artistry going on. Great choice of photos on here for sure. Again, we got a lot of classical art, but I can't help but think that these can be laid out a little bit different. Just make them a little bit more vibrant and interesting. Trying to get people that are into other more commonly known deck builder games, show them a deck like this. If you're trying to get them into this game, they go, what the heck is that? It looks like a pretty dry history textbook. So it's kind of hard to get people into, I would say. A bit more artistry and design could go into this, just the way the pictures are situated. Like, for example, on the starter deck, well, you've got two of the cards have a pretty cool looking sculpture on them, one for military, one for political, and then the populist one is kind of a fresco painting. So it's kind of weird that just that choice there. They're not that uniform, but hey, you can tell what they are. You really just need to know the number and the color. That's the big one there. But I think that somehow the image can kind of be worked into the background of the card a little bit more, just sort of splayed throughout, just to give it a little bit more of an artistic flair. And then the other cards for purchase, same idea, again, using some good pictures, some good images, but how could it sit more in the card a little bit? Just make it feel like it's kind of part of it a little bit. And we'll say for the events cards, they're pretty straightforward. They don't even need values and numbers on them. They're just, again, picture, title, text, all in this good old Times New Roman here. They look a bit more striking. I think the images used on them kind of pop a little bit more. They look like more original art, or something a little bit more is done with those, but there's only a handful of those cards that you're looking at throughout the game. Overall, it's a great game. I love to play it. Even when I pick up the cards, so I kind of just have to guffaw at how simple they are. It's a game that's been around for a little while. If there ever is a redesign, it would be really nice to see a different artwork, or just the artwork sort of amped up a little bit to make it a little bit more interesting. And still, I can't resist playing the game because it's always a fun time at Time of Crisis, but I'm gonna have to put these in the tier C for the state that they're in today. And now we're gonna shift gears just a little bit here and talk about some solo games. Sticking with GMT though, I'm gonna talk about Comancheria. This game I talked about quite a bit in some recent reviews, and really kind of looking at the art through the lens of, this is indigenous storytelling. So how indigenous does the art look? We'll kind of get into that. But essentially what you've got here is you've got 4 different types of cards really. You got your development deck. These are cards that kind of pop up throughout the game. You may be able to purchase some, or they may just affect the state of the game. You've got these culture cards that you can collect. They're up for grabs at a certain stage of the game too, and it kind of makes your capabilities stronger. You've got the war deck, which is the way the war columns are moving towards you, if there are any on the board. And then the history cards, there's only 4 of these. It just kind of tells you what the setup is and what the conditions are to win. So overall, again, classic GMT, got the kind of, plain Jane beige backgroundy cards, but I think there's a little bit more going on here. Because like I say, this is the type of game where you don't necessarily have to just parse the information on the card very quickly. It's a solo game. You can move at your own pace. They're very wordy, these cards, but they are kind of like flipping over the next page of a book and revealing the next chapter in this story here. So they serve a different function. There is some cool design on here, though. There's some really neat stuff going on. The development cards are just different colors for each of the eras here to show you which era you're in. But really neat kind of heading to it. They've got that symbol there that shows this is the time frame that they're in. It's sort of like an indigenous drum here. This design that is actually all throughout the game and throughout the board. Which is pretty neat, and then a bit of a headline there, and then describes what the card's for. Again, they're pretty wordy. There's not really any symbols on there, but it's fairly clear, what you're supposed to do with each of these. There's some colors popping out in the text just to remind you, certain things, like during the passage of time. Well, that text is always in red, things like that. So pretty, for the function it's supposed to serve, yeah, I'd say there's a little bit of playfulness going on there, you could say. The culture cards, they're pretty neat too. They come in all these various different colors. There's a bunch of different tracks that you can run up, basically. There's 3 of each card, and then the color is the same depending on the type of card. Like trade cards are always green, diplomacy cards are always purple. Okay, pretty easy to remember just at looking at them. There's this background kind of image or something in there which is kind of weird. It kind of overlaps with some of the text, so it's kind of hard to read. So his attempt at being kind of neat and getting some, what looks like it should be indigenous art in the background, but really hard to discern. Doesn't sit that well within the card, but still, it's a little bit of creativity, I'll give it that. War column cards, war decks, they have a little bit of that going on. These are very kind of stark in their colors, just because you have to call out which war columns you're actually moving, so kind of color-coded. Really neat the way this one functions too. So I gotta give props to some kind of creative use of some fonts here, some attempt to have like a bit of a background motif, but I think something that could be reworked a little bit. And I made the point about this with just the indigenous art that could be injected more into the game. Like with an actual indigenous artist, I think they could do something really neat or add a fresh perspective to games like these, to these types of war games. But overall, I think there's some pretty neat stuff going on. I mean, it's a little bit more creative than what I've seen in Time of Crisis, so a step in the right direction as far as GMT games that are this deep and rich and have a lot of text and things going on. I'll have to put these ones in tier B. They're beautiful, slightly flawed, but it does not wreck the play of the game overall. But something that could leave a little bit more room for improvement in the future. Whatever, I'm still going to play this game because it's a really great solo experience. And then the last game we'll look at is another solo game. This is Halls of Hegra. It's about a Norwegian defense against the oncoming Germans during World War II. These cards serve a few different functions. They're basically the attacks that are going on all throughout these different phases of the game. These are the cards working against you. And then you have some morale cards that are kind of one-time bonuses or one-time hits throughout the game as you get to pick them up and resolve a few of them. There's also a couple mission cards. I haven't played with these too much yet, but they basically set a couple goals for you as you're playing the game. First thing you will notice is that this is an absolutely beautiful game all throughout. The board is gorgeous, but the cards especially, are such a great canvas for some really brilliant artwork here. So a lot of things going on with this game. First off, you get some pretty straightforward backs of the cards with very simple label on there. Then a wonderful work of art on the back of each one. These are ones that you're drawing that are affecting you at the beginning of each turn here, and will cause some sort of blowback, and it'll give you some details about like what's the weather status that really affects how you play the game. Gives you some quick instructions. There's a bit of iconography as well to show you, if someone's going to take a hit, who's going to get hit first. These are your pieces with very clear icons on them, and a couple icon instructions along the bottom. So there's those, and then the morale cards they're pretty straightforward. They're very text driven here. I've got a couple of icons, but it shows you, when in the game you get to resolve the certain bonuses that you get, or these hits that you're going to take. But yeah, the art on the actual like event cards as you're going through things, it is so striking. I mean, first off, the font is great. It's beautiful. It's got that classic sort of typewriter-y font. It seems to work its way into a lot of military games based around mid-century conflicts, so that's great. The icons are simple, easy to read. You got the photo on there. It looks like a photo. This wonderful, clear, like sort of hand-painted looking picture. It might be digitally done, but it's got this very painterly quality to it. There's a lot of different pieces of unique art all throughout here. This picture is kind of held in place by this little paper clip. There's just this nice little detail here, right? It's just like, you're looking at the file of what you're dealing with. There's some, sort of coffee stain things here that kind of serve an extra purpose. They add that texture, but then they also add a little bit of a separation point on the card itself, along with all the other textures happening in the background, even a little stamp there in the bottom corner, just these little flares that are just so beautiful and so nice overall. This is also the way the game is played. It's very handy the way the cards work too. Like you just flip them, look at them, resolve them, move on. One thing I ran into with Comancheria, just going back to that briefly, is the fact that there's cards all around you all the time. They're kind of sitting in different areas so that you know that you're using them, like these culture cards and whatnot. There's development cards that you can purchase and take in hand. That gets a little kludgy. You're doing a lot of other stuff with your hands. This is a solo game, right? With this game, though, you don't have that. You're really just flipping over the card, resolving it, setting it aside after you're done admiring the beautiful artwork. But this artwork, like I say, it's all throughout. It's in the rule book. It fits so well onto these cards, though. It just makes for such an amazing experience when you're playing this. It's so evocative. It's like reading a really great graphic novel on the topic. You see so much character in these cards and in this design overall. You truly feel the game through the art. So this is the one that's going on that top tier, S tier of games here. Shuffle and deal the cards just so I can look at the beautiful art, because it is a textbook example of what you strive for when you're using original art, and you've got some great artists to do some wonderful work for you putting together your game. So there you have it, 6 games, 6 works of art in their own right. This is my thoughts on them and what the cards look like and how beautiful they are, or where there could be some areas for improvement. Do you agree, disagree? Do you like what you see? Am I being too picky or not picky enough? Let me know. You can sound off in the comments. But overall, I have to thank and congratulate all the artists that put all their hard work into these games to bring them to life. They are all great games. They're all absolutely playable. There may be some areas for improvement in a couple of them, but they really kind of highlight, how cards can really bring a game to life, how they can make it a beautiful experience or just make it a easy to play, fun experience overall. So I gotta give kudos to any artist that puts any amount of work onto a game like this that's sitting on our shelves, that sometimes just tempts us to pull out just to look at these cards and admire the work. So great job all around. I'm looking forward to doing more of these critiques in the future, looking forward to learning about more games and seeing new games that come out with amazing, beautiful art that we can appreciate in the future. So hope you enjoyed this. Bye for now, and I hope to see you at the table someday.